Hey there, listeners. I am Joanne Lee Cornish, your truth bomb dropper in the world of weight loss, body composition, and mastering the art of rocking the body you've always deserved and dreamed of in midlife and beyond. Let's cut through the noise. Society tells us it's downhill from now on. We're told to embrace the middle-aged weight gain, embrace the muscle loss and poor health. If that's your vibe, then cool. But if you're ready to defy the narrative, then I am your gal. This podcast is a no fluff podcast where we break down the essential truths of body composition, toss around some practical tips, and dissect the latest trends. I'm not here to sugarcoat. I'm here to show you what's not just possible, but downright probable for you. If you enjoy this content, be sure to click the link in the show notes to explore how we can team up and kick mediocrity to the curb. I offer one-on-one coaching, my ever-popular group coaching programs, and my corporate Educate to Elevate program. Okay, let's get on with the podcast. Enjoy. Welcome to Midlife Mayhem. Today, I want to talk about zonulin with reference to gluten. And I just want to separate the confusion between zonulin and a food sensitivity or somebody that's sensitive to gluten, because the reality is zonulin affects everybody, whereas gluten does not necessarily affect everyone. So what on earth is zonulin? So zonulin is a protein. It's made in the small intestine, and its job is it acts as the gatekeeper to our gut lining. It controls the tight junctions, which are the little seals between the cells of our intestinal wall. Think of your gut like think of your gut lining like a high security fence. It lets nutrients through, but it keeps bacteria, toxins, undigested particles out. Let's think of a different analogy. Think of your gut lining like cheesecloth. If you pour something over cheesecloth, not everything is going to get through. Yeah. So think of cheesecloth. These are the tight junctions of your gut lining. So think about your gut lining. It separates your intestines with your blood. So whatever gets through the cheesecloth, whatever gets through your gut lining is going to enter the blood. So when your gut lining is like cheesecloth, then not much enters the blood. Everything it drains through, big particles are kept in the cheesecake. My God. In the cheesecloth, only things that are so small, that have been so digested, would actually get through the cheesecloth. Yeah. Would get, and therefore get into the blood. If your gut lining becomes like a pair of fishnet stockings, then everything is going to get through this fishnet stockings, right? So think about food. It doesn't have to be completely broken down. So with the cheesecloth, using this analogy, food has to be completely broken down into the smallest possible form for it to get through the cheesecloth and into your blood. If it's not fully broken down, it's not going to get through. The particles are going to be too big. But if your gut lining just turns into fishnet stockings, then when you eat, the food doesn't have to be fully digested. It doesn't have to be fully broken down to get through the fishnet stockings and into the blood. And also because of those gaps, now you've got toxins and bacteria that should never get into your blood, and they're getting in there. And there arises a lot of food sensitivities. So what does this have to do with zonulin? Zonulin controls that tight junctions. Think about when zonulin is released, it opens up those junctions. So it turns that cheesecake, oh my God, I just said it again. It turns that cheesecloth into fishnet stockings. Is our analogy working? So it controls the tight junctions and it opens up those junctions. So that's its job. It's normal. That's okay when it is controlled. But here's where it gets problematic. When zonulin is chronically or excessively elevated, that gut lining, that barrier stays open too long. And things that cheesecake turned into fishnet stockings, and things that were never meant to enter your bloodstream start leaking through. So this is what is referred to as leaky gut, or more clinically is called increased intestinal permeability. Let's do a little backtrack, because the history of zonulin is quite fascinating. So zonulin was discovered by a doctor, I hope I'm saying this right, Alessio Fasano. He was a gastroenterologist in the early 2000s, Italian, I hope you called that. And he was studying celiac disease and looking into how gluten triggered inflammation in the gut. So what he found that gliadin, which I'm going to talk about this in the Type 28 program, but he found that gliadin, which is a component of gluten, and sets off celiac reactions. It triggers the release of zonulin. So zonulin, in turn, opened the gut wall, allowing food, proteins, and other antigens into the bloodstream. It turned the cheesecloth into a pair of fishnet stockings. And this was the missing link in how gluten triggers such widespread immune responses. So when we talk about immune responses, what we're talking about here is, so you've got your food, it's being digested, it meets the cheesecloth, and it has to be fully digested, and anything that's fully digested passes through the cheesecloth and gets into the blood, and off it goes. It travels off to the liver. If that now if the food comes into your intestines, and that cheesecloth is now fishnet stockings, now the food doesn't have to be fully digested, and bacteria and toxins, everything can get through into the bloodstream. And when it enters the bloodstream, there is an immune response, because the immune system sees what's getting into the bloodstream and says, what on earth is this? This isn't meant to be here. And it goes to fight, it goes to battle for you. And so there is an immune response. So what this Dr. Alessio Fransano was trying to do, he's trying to figure out why gluten triggered such a widespread immune response. And what he found was it was because gluten increased zonulin, and zonulin turned that cheesecloth into fishnet stockings. So it opened up what are meant to be tight junctions of your gut lining, and it opened them up. Now, here's what he also found. He found that zonulin isn't just activated by gluten, it can be stimulated by bacteria, toxins, and inflammation, meaning that you don't have to have celiac or even a gluten issue to have a zonulin problem. So that's a big deal, guys, because when we hear about gluten sensitivity, and some people say, oh, that doesn't affect me, that's not me, I'm perfectly good. Gluten increases zonulin. Zonulin isn't random. Zonulin affects everybody. It's not that some people are prone to a food sensitivity of this sort or that sort. Zonulin, it by nature has this effect of opening up the tight junctions of the gut lining. So you don't have to have a gluten issue to have an issue with zonulin. So it's not a sensitivity, it's a universal mechanism. This is important to understand, that zonulin is not a sensitivity. It's not like gluten or dairy or soy, where some people react and some don't. Zonulin is a protein that functions the same way in everyone. When it is released, it loosens the gut lining, period. And gluten increases zonulin, period. It's not whether you feel it or not. The effect is biological. It's not subjective. Whether you're a bodybuilder or a grandma or a teenager, when zonulin goes up, your intestinal barrier will become more permeable. That's completely different to a food sensitivity, which involves an individualized, personalized immune response. Some people might be sensitive to eggs, or some people might be sensitive to dairy. Some might not, but zonulin affects all humans in the same mechanical way. It opens the gate. And when you open the gut lining, turning it into fishnet stockings, things will enter the blood that aren't meant to enter the blood. And When that happens, you will have an immune response. Enter LPS. So LPS is something that I haven't talked about before. I'm going to expand on it in the Type 28 program, which starts July the 6th. It's going to be nice. Once I finish my Mastering Midlife program, I won't have to plug anything in any of these podcasts for a while. So bear with me. So here's what LPS is. Here's where we take things to the next level. So when zonulin opens the gut barrier, one of the major offenders that can sneak into the bloodstream is LPS. Polysaccharide. LPS is a toxin released by gram-negative bacteria. So gram-negative bacteria are bacteria that normally live in your gut, totally normal in small amounts. But when LPS crosses into your bloodstream, your immune system goes into full decon 1 mode. It goes off. Your immune system sees LPS as a foreign invader of the worst type, and it responds with massive inflammation, oxidative stress, and massive immune activation, even if you're not technically sick. This is known as metabolic intoxemia, and it's linked to insulin resistance, chronic fatigue, brain fog, autoimmune flares, mood disorders, skin problems, and yes, gut system of symptoms like bloating, gas, and cramps. So while zonulin isn't necessarily dangerous by itself, it sets the stage for these bad actors like LPS get into places they shouldn't be. LPS should not get into your blood. In the Type 28 program, I talk about LPS with regards to body composition, but for now, just know it's the outer coating of certain bacteria that, if it's in your gut in small amounts, you're okay. If it gets into your bloodstream, the immune system has a fit. And if zonulin is over-released chronically, it will get into your bloodstream. So what triggers zonulin? We know what zonulin does. It does it in everybody. Nobody's the exception. The two biggest triggers are gluten, specifically gliadin, which is a type of gluten, a part of gluten. I'm not going to talk about that here. Come do the Type 28 program. In people with, say, celiac, gluten triggers a big zonulin release, massive. But even in non-celiacs, gluten can increase zonulin temporarily, especially if it's especially hard on people if they have a pre-existing inflammation or gut issue. So if you've already got leaky gut and then you dump gluten in, good luck with that. What else triggers zonulin? So bacterial overgrowth or infection. So pathogens like Salmonella, E. coli, even bacterial imbalances like SIBO can trigger zonulin. So now when I start mentioning things like E. coli and Salmonella, you know what that entails, right? Water being drawn in and diarrhea and being massively sick. These also trigger zonulin, which is why you have the E. coli, you have the Salmonella, triggers zonulin. Zonulin releases, makes the gut lining more permeable, and here you go. Massive diarrhea. Everything goes straight through you. That is because of the massive zonulin release that is caused by these pathogens. But gluten too triggers zonulin, just not to the same extent. Why would the body even have zonulin? How can this ever be good? Zonulin appears to be part of your body's defense mechanism. So it's trying to flush out unwanted microbes by opening the barrier. Unfortunately, this really backfires when it's chronic. So when it happens now and again, so again, you've got things like E. coli. Your body wants to get rid of that. So it's going to open up the junctions, it's going to enter the blood, and the immune system's going to go, and all hell breaks loose, right? So there's a reason for temporarily doing that. But what if it's constant? What if it's chronic? When people eat gluten now and again, I would say I'm in that category. Show me a bread basket. I've never refused a bread basket in my life, right? But I don't, on a daily basis, have any bread products in the house at all, ever. I don't even think about it. They're not even here. So I eat a little bit of gluten. I don't know. A few times a month, I would say. Yes, I'm going to have a zonulin. It's going to increase zonulin. Do I know it? No. Fine. But what if you're having some sort of gluten product every day? What if you're having it several times a day? What if you're having, oh, you had some toast for breakfast. Maybe you had that burrito for lunch. Maybe you're doing tacos or something for dinner. Maybe you've got the, you see the issue there? Now you're constantly consuming foods that are going to trigger zonulin. You don't get a pass. Nobody gets a pass. Gluten increases, zonulin weakens the gut lining, turns it into, let's say, fishnet stockings. Now you've got food particles that are not fully digested getting into your bloodstream. Now you have bacteria and toxins that are getting into your bloodstream that weren't meant to get into your bloodstream. And if you've got like LPS, that's really pretty bad, and it's getting into your bloodstream. And you're creating that environment several times a day, you will have issues. You will have leaky gut, because that's what zonulin does. It creates leaky gut, but it's meant to open it up and shut it back down. I've proved this so many times. It's one of the reasons that in my type 28 program, I take gluten out. Gluten is a main irritant. There are many reasons why people can be sensitive to gluten. It's not just necessarily gluten itself, it's which part of gluten, is the antibodies of gluten, is the whole thing. But know that every time you consume gluten, you are increasing zonulin. And zonulin, that's what it does. So if you're consuming a lot of gluten, you can pretty much guarantee that you have leaky gut, and that level of leaky gut you might have normalized. You might think, no, I'm fine. No, you've just normalized it. And that is having an immune response. If you're having an immune response, you are having an inflammatory response. That's how it works. When you trigger the immune system, one of the ways it acts is by triggering an inflammatory response. If you have an inflammatory response, that is going to your liver. If that is going to your liver, your elevated risk of insulin resistance, etc., 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 etc. Again, an environment in a temporary form, turned on, turn off, not a problem. Immune system triggered, turned on, turned off, that's how it's meant to work. Inflammation turned on, turned off, that's how it's meant to work. Any of those systems that are turned on and left on and have this low grade activity are insanely problematic. But they're normalized because you're feeling like that all the time. First time I took gluten out of Kevin's diet, albeit kicking and screaming, he lost 15 pounds in 10 days. And it was all in his gut. His waist shrank. He didn't lose 15 pounds of fat. He didn't cut his calories. I think he was wolfing down sweet potatoes and rice instead. He lost 15 pounds in 10 days. That was pure inflammation that he normalized. If you would have asked him, he did not feel bloated. He did not feel gassy. He did not want to do it. 15 pounds, I think it was 15 pounds and 4 inches, something like that, in 10 days. That is one of the reasons when people do the Type 28 program, nobody wants to do this program. Has amazing results in the first week. Because when you take out an irritant like that, and especially you take that sort of irritant out with somebody where they're consuming quite a lot of gluten, and they're doing it because they feel fine, they're not fine. They can feel better, and they will feel better. And once you cut gluten out, once you actually, it's one thing just telling people don't eat gluten. That's great. That's great to do that. That makes them feel good about themselves, right? Or you can coach people on gluten, the level of sensitivity because of recent farming and pesticides and things like that. And you can educate people on gluten and explain the different ways that gluten can be reactive, and then explain something like zonulin, where there is nobody that escapes that. And people will make better choices all by themselves. Like, from listening to this podcast, maybe you're like me and you think, I don't eat it that often, or I never eat it. Or maybe you're thinking like, oh, wow, I guess I do eat quite a bit of bread product. I never thought I had an issue. You have an issue because you can't not have an issue. You can't not have an issue because of the zonulin that's been released. I will stop plugging my programs. But again, I plug them because I only offer them once a year in a live format. Oh my gosh, guys. They're all available in a self-study format, but you know how that goes. Not everybody does all the self-study. But in the live format, I'm right there. I'm right there to coach and bring calmness and an excitement to this sort of information. We start July the 6th. Which I think is ironic because July 4th, and there'll be all sorts of gluten going on and food colorings. And I get into food colorings. That's a fascinating one when it comes to gluten. Gluten and food colorings, guys, do not mix. Come and do the Type 28 program to find out more. But for today was about zonulin. What can you do about zonulin? Can you test for it? Yeah, there are two main ways you can test for zonulin. You're not going to get it in your standard blood work. You have to ask for it, but you can do a stool test. So that's going to measure how much zonulin is being released into your gut lumen. It gives an insight into local permeability. It's often included in a GI map or doctor's data panel. There are also, this can do it by blood test. There's a serum zonulin test, and that measures zonulin that's leaked into your bloodstream. So if you do the blood test, that might suggest a systemic gut barrier disruption, which is often seen in my autoimmune clients or chronic inflammatory conditions. So share this information. Again, just to really stress, zonulin is very different to a food sensitivity. It affects everybody. That's what it does. It opens up the gut tight junctions. It's triggered by gluten, bacteria, toxins. The symptoms are not always obvious, but they are still harmful. They are the sort of symptoms that are normalized and people do not realize what's going on. Reversible? Absolutely, simply by removal, and the results are rapid. Okay, that's it for zonulin. If you're interested in the Type 28 program, just go to type28, the number 28.com, and we start real soon. I do hope you enjoyed this episode of Midlife Mayhem. Be sure to subscribe and be sure to tell your friends about this wonderful podcast. If you would like more of me, then on social, it's simple, just my name at Joanne Lee Cornish. Also my website, theshrinkshop.com, where you can see all my coaching programs. There are many ways we can work together. Obviously, I do private one-on-one coaching. I do all my programs are in a self-study form, and all my programs are run as a live program at least once a year. I try and do twice, but it usually ends up being once. I have mindset program. I have my awesome 5-day peak week shred that people love. I have the signature weight loss program. I have Type 28, which is advanced weight loss. I have muscle mastery, and I have mastering midlife. So 6 programs that offer a progression to fully understand the body composition through the ages. If you have questions, if you're wondering how I can help you, then simply shoot me an email at jo@theshrinkshop.com. Tell me what's going on, and I'll get back to you and let you know the way I can help. Okay, that's it for now.